Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tanai and this is The Idol Creative. So today, as part of the Self-Care Friday series, for those of you who don't know, I have been doing a Self-Care Friday series since November, and then I stopped for a little while because I've been neglecting my self-care. But what I thought I would do today is do something a little bit different for Self-Care Friday and discuss mental health and therapy. Since last week was Mental Health Awareness Week, I had a really good therapy session with my therapist, and I guess you can call it oversharing to a certain extent, but I had put up on my story that I had a really good session with my therapist, and I put out just a feeler with everyone to see if they would be interested in knowing the benefits that I have gotten and what my experience has been in therapy. And I put up a poll and it was unanimous that everyone wanted to see a video on it. I got some really good responses, so a lot of people had DM'd me. So following on from that, I decided to put a Q&A up on my Instagram story for people to ask questions about kind of therapy or what they want to know. And I got quite a good few responses, so I thought that I would spend today in this video kind of answering some of those questions and discussing why I kind of decided to go into therapy, what I found quite helpful, and all of that stuff. I hope that this answers all your questions, but I think that I'm going to continue doing the Self-Care Friday series where I kind of have different I don't know how to explain, maybe discuss different topics around mental health and self-care and all of those things. I've been given like 10 questions to answer, so I'm going to answer all of those in this video and maybe give my 2 cents in here or there maybe afterwards. I'm also going to link some good resources for you guys who maybe are not so comfortable with therapy or it's new to you want to know more. There's some great resources out there and I will link a few in there for you guys. So with that being said, I am literally going to go into the first question. At what point did I think therapy was needed? And this is a great question because in my job, so I'm a youth worker and I've worked with young people for about the last 8 or 9 years. So I've been doing this work, I've been in this field for quite a long time. And one thing that I have discussed a lot with many young people and many young adults is therapy or counseling, to discuss kind of some of the trauma and the things that they've experienced. And even if they hadn't experienced trauma, I was explaining it to them in regards to sometimes it's just nice to speak to someone who is completely not related to your life. So they're not a family friend, they're not family, they're not friends, they're not your peers, they're not anything. And it's good to just go to someone and be able to kind of just offload how you're feeling. So I have been advising that to my young people for as long as I've worked in this sector, and I've never ever thought that it applied to me, which is really quite bizarre. I never thought about that. So it was only until I was in a job that I really hated being in, so much that it caused me such anxiety that I couldn't eat, and also I was getting like pins and needles, like really numb hands, that I thought maybe I might need therapy. So I did mention this in a post that I put up on my Instagram, but I just hated the job I was in, and it was so bad that I was just trying to avoid going to work as much as possible. I didn't want to go in. I was counting down the days till my holiday. I was going to Brazil that year. So I was counting down the days, and I lost so much weight. I was just not eating the way I was supposed to. I lost my appetite, didn't want to eat. I'm so glad it never disrupted my sleep, because that's the one thing I don't play about is sleep. But it affected my body in like so many physical ways. And I guess the average person would have looked at me and been like, oh Tana, you lost weight, or Tana, you look really good. But really and truly, like, I was deteriorating inside because I hated that job so much. So only at that point I was like contemplating like, oh, maybe I do need therapy, because I was so close to almost, I was going to get signed off work. I had already planned how I was going to sign off work. I was going to go to my GP and just say, look, it's really like doing a lot for me mentally and emotionally, and I just physically can't go in. I ended up not doing that, and I don't know why I didn't, but I ended up staying in the job until I found another job and I handed my notice in. But that was the first time I kind of had contemplated it. But the real time that it really hit me, like that I really needed to have therapy, actual breaking point, was actually in lockdown. And I think it was just also coupled with, I think 2020 was such an uncertain year for me, even at the start of the year, because I had just left this job that I didn't want to be in anymore, and I then moved into this place where like my new job wasn't starting yet, and I was just so uncertain and everything was just so up in the air. So even that had kind of rattled me. It was just like a completely different change. And I have mentioned before in videos that I am an empath, and I don't know if a lot of you know what that means, but an empath is just someone who is like really highly sensitive, I guess, to not only like their own issues, but also mostly highly sensitive to other people's issues or other things that are going on in the world or other things that are happening in someone's life. So for me, like things that really rattled me were Kobe Bryant, that whole thing that kind of shook the whole world up. Like it really affected me, like it almost happened to me, or like I know that family, which sounds really crazy, but that's what empath is. An empath is someone who is really like, I don't know how to explain it, just really feels things as if it happened to them. They take on a lot of like what's happening in the world, and it really, like, some people are able to shut off from that. Empaths or not, I am not able to shut off from it at all. So that, and also like then the lockdown, and then like just hearing people are dying from COVID and all of that stuff was bad. On top of that, the BLM stuff actually took me out. Like I actually think I came off of Instagram for 3 months because I was just physically, I couldn't explain it, but I was in agony, like in pain. Like I can't explain it, but I was in pain, as if I'm sure there was other people who feel this way that I was feeling at that time. But I literally, it was heart-wrenching for me, like gut-wrenching. So I managed to kind of brush that aside and just continue going, and then things kind of started to get even worse for me because I was in an environment that wasn't encouraging me to grow or giving me the space where I felt safe enough to really express myself or really just thrive, I guess. And that, coupled with guilt that I've had for every single thing that I've ever done bad in my life, and fear of the future, it was just a recipe for disaster. So at that point, I absolutely just crumbled. Like it was so debilitating. Like I remember speaking to my sister on the phone and being like, I literally just sit in my room and just think about that time when I did this or that time when I did that, and I just ruminate on it and ruminate on it and ruminate on it. And I can almost remember feeling like I wanted to cry. Like I just felt this sense of like overwhelming feeling. And my sister was like, yeah, no, that's really not good. And I really realized like, yeah, no, like this is actually the time when I actually really definitely need to get help, because it was too much. Like it was just so much that my mind was going on overtime. So it was just like an overwhelming feeling of just feelings. It was just like overwhelming and uncontrollable. And it got to a point where I was just like, I just really can't take this anymore. So I hope that answers your question in regards to my breaking point was definitely COVID. And I think for a lot of people, COVID and lockdown specifically, just being at home and being stuck at home and being stuck by yourself with your own thoughts thinking about everything, analyzing everything, it really can have like a really big effect on your mental health, also, as well as environmental factors or things that are happening in the world. It was just a recipe for disaster. So that's when my breaking point was, that I actually was like, right, I actually need to go and see a therapist. How did you find the strength slash courage slash motivation to actually go to therapy? So this question is really funny to me, because when I read this question, I kind of was like, strength and courage have nothing to do with it. Like, I didn't think that it came from strength as to why I decided to go for therapy, or I didn't think it was a courageous thing for me to go to therapy. But actually thinking about it now, I had to remind myself that there's one of my favorite scriptures that I really like, and my favorite scripture is in 2 Corinthians 12 verses 10. You'd think if it was my favorite, I would actually have memorized it, but that's another story for another day. But the latter part of it, I'm not going to read the full thing, but the last statement is, "For when I am weak, I am powerful." I think it resonates with me so much, because I think that you have to find the strength to be able to ask for help. Like, it doesn't come naturally for a lot of us. It doesn't come naturally for me. I'm someone who normally does things on my own. And sometimes you have to be at your weakest point in order to gain the strength to then get yourself out of that weak point. So I think it was my my ability not to cope in my weakest point that gave me the strength and the ability to kind of reach out and be like, right, I no longer want to feel this way. I just wanted to stop. I just didn't want to feel the way that I was feeling. And I don't know if a lot of you guys know about this thing called the theory of change, or the change theory, but like, I'll pop a diagram here. Basically, you go through different stages in your life, and it's just a continuous thing. The journey isn't linear. It's like, you can start at any point and you can exit at any point. But basically, the theory of change, you start off at pre-contemplation, then you start off at contemplation, then it's preparation, then it is action, and I think maintenance. When I was talking to my young people about it, I mean, therapy has always been at the back of my mind. It's always been something that I was like, I'm preaching to all these people about, you should go to therapy, or you should do this and do that, and I haven't given it a go myself. So I think I was in pre-contemplation at that point. I think contemplation was when I was at my job, and then I think preparation was literally when I was at that really weak point in lockdown, and I was like, right, you actually need to start looking and finding therapists. So I went through that cycle of change, the first 3 cycles of that change. What specifically were you looking for in a therapist? For them to understand not just what it's like living as a Black person or living as a Black woman, but specifically living as a dark-skinned woman, and colorism. That was really important for me, and I could go on a tangent about colorism if I could. I would definitely go on a tangent. But yeah, I think a lot of my issues stemmed from identity and colorism, and I think it affected how I am today. Now, not saying that these issues still affect me like right now, but I think it's molded me to be the person that I am. I think it was more of an issue when I was younger, around like being young and not knowing my identity, to now, like, I'm more fully aware of my identity, but now I can understand why some decisions that I made when I didn't know my identity affected my life. I hope that makes sense. And I think as well, another thing that I also wanted, what I was looking for in a therapist, I was also looking for someone who respected my faith and beliefs. Funnily enough, that sounds like, yeah, sure, of course they're gonna respect that. However, not that I've had any experience with that, but sometimes you have to kind of be quite strong in your boundaries sometimes, because I think that sometimes when you do talk to people, I think naturally people want to debunk everything, or they want to make you question everything, or really want to give you a different perspective. And I think there's a difference of getting a good different perspective, and then there's a difference of being respectful with someone's faith. And I just wanted someone who respects my faith, in regards to, if I say no, this is what I believe and my thoughts are not changing on that, you are allowed to say that and feel safe within that. So those are the two things that I really looked for in a therapist, is to understand those two dynamics in regards to my identity, as they are part of my identity. Was it easy to find a good therapist, and do you think it takes time to find a good one? So I thought that this was a really good question, and I'm not sure if I have the answer to the latter part of that question. However, I don't think it was extremely hard for me to find a therapist. I think what was the hardest part was knowing where to find one. I think that was definitely the hardest part, because I think at first I started looking for therapists through recommendations from friends, and in hindsight I actually wish that I hadn't have done that. I think recommendations are great if they haven't worked with that specific therapist, but I think if a friend was to recommend me a therapist that they've had done work with, I don't know if necessarily I would take that, or I would do that. And I also think vice versa, if someone asked me, oh Tana, who's the therapist that you're working with now, can I work with her? In hindsight, when I think about it now, I probably should say no. And that might sound crazy to a lot of people, because they're going to be like, you Tana, you're being like the enemy of process, and you're just being like, why would you not want to help your friend? But I think that this journey of getting help with your mental health is catered to that one person. I think that's that one person's journey. There is something about having autonomy in my journey that my experience, like for instance, my friend's experience with her therapist might not be the same experience that I have. And I think by me I've talked to my friends about my therapy sessions and how my therapist has helped me to think about this or to think about that, and then they've gone and they've maybe said a similar thing, and my therapist might say something completely different to them. I think that it is important to go on that journey and have that journey yourself. It's not the same as, like, I don't know if people will be like, oh, that's just the same as you saying, you know, oh Tanai, like, where'd you get that outfit from? And I'm like, I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you because I think that this is a process. I can tell you where to find a therapist. I mean, if you end up finding the same therapist I have, that's fine. But I don't want people to ever base or like have a preconception of what their sessions are going to look like, or what their journey is going to look like based off of my experience, because we all will have different experiences with therapy. I don't know if that necessarily makes sense to people, but like I said, this journey for me, this is my personal opinion anyway, I don't know if anyone else agrees, but for me, I think that my journey of finding my therapist is sacred. Like, it is something that I've had to do, and I'm happy doing that, and I've put in the work to make sure that I found someone who is the best fit for me. And I don't think that you should go through therapy just thinking that one size fits all, because a therapist is just not going to be, just because you hear that from someone else that therapist is good doesn't mean they're going to be good for you. They might say stuff that might trigger you, they might not be the perfect fit for you. So I think that it's really important that you also do the research yourself. I mean, if you're okay giving people names of your therapist, or you're okay going from recommendations from your friends, then that is completely up to you. But I'm going from my own personal view of that. But ultimately, I ended up finding my therapist on the Black, African, and Asian Therapy Network, which is basically an online directory of different therapists that are obviously all Black, African, or Asian. because I think that goes back to the whole thing of me saying that I wanted someone who was going to understand the struggles that I have gone through, specifically being Black. So when you go on there, you can find a therapist, and there's a directory, and you can kind of like choose what they have, like different areas they're from, and their profiles on there. You can kind of find people that are kind of suited to your needs, and you can see what they have and what they offer, what services they offer. So that's where I found my therapist from. I actually saw my therapist profile, and the areas that she covered resonated with me. So I got in contact with her in October, and then I officially met her in January for an initial assessment. So those of you who don't know what an initial assessment is, or sometimes they'll call them consultations, but they are basically like a taster session to see if they are the right fit for you, and you are also the right fit for them, as in they can support you with what you need. So it's like a joint decision to decide whether or not this partnership or this interaction is going to be a good one, or beneficial, I guess. And yeah, so I had my first initial consultation or initial assessment with her, and that's all she wrote, basically. Just as a heads up, like some initial assessments or consultations can be discounted, or they can be free, or sometimes you do have to pay for it. So just a heads up for that. I don't know what it's like for other countries. I can only speak for London, where I live. So that's also another heads up as well. So yeah, I think the process is different for everyone. For me, it took almost 4 months for me to find my therapist, and she's my first and only therapist so far. I know not everyone's going to have that experience. You probably have to go through quite a lot of therapists, and I had already built myself up to think I was probably going to go through loads of therapists and not find one that I liked, but I happened to find just one that I liked and didn't have to kind of like really like go through loads of different people. And it's so funny because I made a joke with one of my friends one time who is in this sector, and I literally was like, if I don't like my therapist, I don't like the sessions that I'm doing with them, can I get my money back? And obviously the answer is no, but I literally was like, wow, so I literally have to spend all this money going through someone, and then I might not like them, and then I ended up finding someone that I liked the first time. So that leads me on to the next question. Did you go private or with NHS, and if private, how much? This is also another great question. I went private because I wanted control in who I feel is a good fit for me, other than instead of being allocated someone through the NHS. Now, I'm very mindful that not everybody has the money or the income to kind of just go privately in regards to seeking help. So I completely understand that there are some people who would want to go down the NHS route because it is free in most instances. So I can only speak from my experience of doing private therapy, and I had the money in order to do it, so I decided that was the best fit for me. In terms of the pricing, you guys are probably going to think I'm just being funny, but I am not going to share how much I pay for therapy, and this kind of goes back to what I mentioned before about the autonomy of my own journey in therapy, and that journey is really special to me. And the best way I can explain it to you is my therapy session might be £22 per session. Your session might be £55 per session. It is different for different people. So for me I feel like I'll be giving you guys doing a huge disservice by being like, yeah, I pay X, Y, and Z, and then you find someone and it's literally 2 times more than that, or or yeah, just not the price that you were expecting. So I think for everybody, it's a responsibility of everyone, and I know that everyone needs help, but it is a responsibility, I believe, in my opinion, to kind of do the research and find something that fits you and not rely on the information that someone else has given. And I'm also the person who's giving the information. I don't want to go and be like, yeah, therapy is cheap as chips, and then you turn around, you'll be like, but Tanai, I thought you said that therapy was 30, so why is this therapist charging me 50? So I know I'm very good at explaining myself, but I don't know if this necessarily makes sense. But what I will say is that therapy is, I wrote down in my notebook that it is expensive, but worth the investment. And now I want to change that to therapy, especially private therapy, is an investment. Financially, emotionally, it's an investment. It's an investment in self. We spend money in the gym, that's an investment in yourself. We spend money on good food, that's an investment in yourself. You spend money on clothes, trainers, etc. It's an investment in yourself, but it is definitely worth it. So with that being said, it can range from £45 and upwards, and that could be even on the lower scale. I've seen some therapists charge £60 and upwards, so it all kind of varies. But one thing I will say, I repeat, do not let that deter you from looking for a therapist, because you will find someone that is suitable to your current financial needs. Which, what I thought I would also share as well is that some therapists do concessions. Now, what concessions is so for instance, on the Black, African, Asian, I always get this messed up and I don't know why. On the Black, African and Asian Therapy Network, when you go onto the directory, at the bottom of the profile of the therapist that you choose to look at, you will see that they may have at the bottom that they do concessions. And what concessions is depending on your income. If you're on a low income or you're suffering from financial hardship, I know a lot of people during COVID were suffering from financial hardships. The concessions are basically, the therapist might offer you their service at either a discounted price, or you could kind of have that conversation with them about how much you can pay for therapy. So my suggestion is, if you are someone who is on a low income, or you are someone who is struggling with financial hardships, I would suggest whatever therapist you contact, even if it's through BAATN, or it's through, like, you've seen someone and you want to get in contact with them via email, ask them what their provisions are in regards to whether they cater or they can support someone with a low income, or who is going through financial hardship. My motto, I'm starting to realize, and I'm starting to live by it a lot more, is if you don't ask, you don't get. So don't feel ashamed, or don't feel like, I can't speak to them, I can't ask them. Like, it's good sometimes to get the discounts. And what a better way to get a discount or get a reduced price to be able to support you with your mental health. Like, if there's one time you should ask for something, I think that's definitely the time. So yes, I hope that answered that question.